An abridgment of Thomas Manton's commentary on the Epistle of James chapter 3 verses 3 to 5. When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is but a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. In these verses, James draws from familiar comparisons to illustrate the powerful impact that seemingly small things can have on much larger matters. These comparisons, though simple in nature, require careful reflection as they convey profound moral and spiritual truths. James likens the tongue to a bridle that directs a horse and to a rudder that steers a ship. Although both the bridle and rudder are small in size, they have great control over the movement of much larger bodies. In the same way, the tongue, though small, wields great power and influence in guiding moral conduct. Just as a bridle prevents a horse from stumbling and a rudder keeps a ship from crashing onto rocks, so too can the control of the tongue prevent calamity in our lives. Solomon echoes this sentiment in Proverbs 21 verse 23. He who guards his mouth and his tongue keeps himself from calamity. James stresses that the tongue, despite its smallness, can have an outsized effect on life's direction. He reinforces the comparison by emphasizing that a controlled tongue can lead to a controlled life. As small as it is, the tongue can do great things if managed properly, but it also has the capacity for great harm if left unchecked. James provides the example of boasting as a prime example of the tongue's influence. The Greek word used here means to make great boasts, which captures the sense of pride and presumption that often accompanies the misuse of speech. He could have said, "The tongue does great things," for indeed, those who master the tongue can exercise control over their whole body. Yet, by focusing on boasting, James highlights a specific sin that is all too common with the tongue: prideful speech. Boasting is a sin of the tongue that frequently reveals the arrogance of the heart. Those who lack control over their spirit and actions often boast of things they cannot or will not accomplish. Boasting is particularly prevalent among hypocrites and vain individuals who trumpet their own achievements and virtues. As the psalmist laments, flattering lips are associated with every boastful tongue. Psalm 12 verse 3, showing the connection between prideful speech and deceit. Solomon also warns against the dangers of boasting in Proverbs 14 verse 3, where he writes, "A fool's talk brings a rod to his back." In contrast, true grace humbles the heart, while false grace puffs it up, causing the tongue to overstep its bounds in pride. James then introduces another powerful image, likening the tongue to a spark that can set an entire forest ablaze. Just as a small spark can ignite a great fire, so too can a few careless words lead to great destruction. It may seem that words, which disappear as soon as they are spoken, would have little lasting influence. Yet James asserts that the tongue, like a spark, has the potential to cause untold damage. Words may pass with the breath, but their effects can linger, wreaking havoc long after they are spoken. This simile teaches us not to underestimate the significance of small things in nature, art, religion, or providence. In every sphere, great outcomes often have small beginnings. In nature, for instance, important things often grow from small seeds. Similarly, in the spiritual realm, small beginnings can lead to profound transformations. As Jesus said, "A little yeast works through the whole batch of dough," Matthew 13 verse 33. In religion, small actions, whether good or evil, can have wide-reaching consequences. This truth is encapsulated in Zechariah 4 verse 10, which reminds us not to despise the day of small things. From these examples, James calls us to consider how small things can hold great significance. In God's providence, even the smallest efforts can yield substantial results. The ability to tame wild animals like horses with a small bridle or to steer a massive ship with a tiny rudder is a gift of human ingenuity, yet this gift is given by God. As Isaiah 54 verse 16 declares, God created the blacksmith who forges weapons, and in Exodus 31 verse 3, He filled Bezalel with the Spirit of God to master craftsmanship. These human skills are not achievements to boast about, but are given by the Lord for the good of all. They remind us to thank God for the wisdom He imparts to humanity and to seek His guidance in all our endeavors. For blessed is he who trusts in the Lord. Proverbs 16 verse 20. The control of the tongue is not only a matter of individual restraint, but also reflects a broader truth about human nature. The wildness of the untamed tongue is reflective of humanity's sinful inclinations. Left unchecked, human nature is prone to rebellion, and the tongue often reveals the deeper desires of the heart. In Psalm 32 verse 9, we are warned not to be like the horse or mule, which require bit and bridle to restrain their natural inclinations. Without the restraint of God's grace, we would all be left to the wildness of our sinful nature. Boasting, as James highlights, is one of the most frequent sins of the tongue. Pride, which often begins in the heart, finds its most common expression in speech. The tongue becomes the trumpet for the pride within, and boasting manifests in various ways. Bold boasting is seen in figures like the king of Babylon in Isaiah 14 verse 13, who dared to challenge God himself, or in the arrogant speeches of Pharaoh, who questioned, "Who is the God of the Hebrews, that I should let you go?" Exodus 5 verse 2. Such examples demonstrate how the tongue can be used to flaunt defiance against both God and man. Boasting also manifests in the proud display of self-worth. People often entertain fantasies of grandeur in their own minds, and then feel compelled to declare these delusions to others, seeking applause. However, it is not for man to promote his own cause. Just as Olympic athletes do not crown themselves, neither should we seek to elevate ourselves. Self-praise is never as noble as receiving commendation from others. Furthermore, the tongue is frequently used to make proud and presumptuous promises, as seen in Exodus 15 verse 9, where enemies boast of pursuing and overtaking, only to find that their ambitions exceed their abilities. In light of these warnings, James urges us to take notice of the seemingly small things in life. Small sins, like a spark, can lead to great destruction, while small graces can have significant spiritual impact. Ecclesiastes 10 verse 13 warns that what begins as folly can end in wickedness, just as what begins as a light-hearted argument can quickly escalate into a heated quarrel. Proverbs 17 verse 14 teaches that starting a quarrel is like opening a floodgate. Once the waters are released, they cannot be easily recalled. Similarly, heresies and false teachings may begin as minor deviations from the truth, but, like a spark, can spread until they consume entire churches, as was the case with the Arian controversy that ignited theological turmoil across the Christian world. Great things often start small. Luther's Reformation began by challenging those selling indulgences. Christ's kingdom, initially seen as weak and insignificant, eventually spread to encompass the entire world, just as foretold in Daniel 2 verse 35. Therefore, we are called to resist sin in its earliest stages and to guard against small beginnings that may lead to greater harm. As Ephesians 4 verse 27 warns, we must give no place to the devil and be vigilant against the encroachment of sin. We did not give in to them for a moment, says the apostle, Galatians 2 verse 5. At the same time, we must also be careful not to despise the humble beginnings of God's work in our lives. Zechariah 4 verse 10 reminds us that what may appear as insignificant now may, by God's grace, grow into something far greater than we could ever imagine. In all of this, James teaches us to be mindful of both the power and the danger of the tongue. Though it is small, it holds the potential for great good or great evil, and it requires the grace of God and the discipline of the Spirit to bring it under control.